Yes, sir. Welcome back. Have a seat. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Slisher, who's got a few questions for you.
All right.
And just a reminder, you're still under oath.
Yes.
Mr. Slisher.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We met briefly this morning. Introduced myself. I'm Steve Slisher on behalf of the state. Appreciate you coming in today and being candid in the questions that you've answered, both on the questionnaire, to the court, and to defense counsel. I was interested when you were asked to name some things that Mr. Nelson would want to know if he were to meet you at a party, that you would be kind and fair, and that you're a family man and a Christian. It sounds like those are the four things that you're valuing most.
Yes.
And you expressed your faith in part in your questionnaire as well. You're not examined on that to be a juror, but you were asked to take an oath in which you swore that you would fairly and truthfully answer the questions put to you.
Yes.
And I take it from your reaffirmation of that today and the seriousness with which you hold your faith that that's something that you're going to endeavor to do as best you can.
Yes.
And we appreciate that. And the other thing you said about yourself is that you wanted people to understand that you're fair. And that's so important too, to be fair to both sides on this case. Because what we're looking for is a juror who can come in and that both sides can be assured that neither one of us is in a different position or a position a little bit behind with you. Right? That you would be evaluating this case just on the facts, the evidence, and the instructions that the judge gives you. All right?
That is correct, yes.
I wanted to follow up on some concerns that you had raised about safety. And I think that when questioned by defense counsel, you indicated that you weren't as concerned about your own personal safety here in the courtroom. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
But in your questionnaire, I think what your answer in the question of would you want to serve as a juror in this case, you said that you were not sure. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell us why you weren't sure?
It's more from a safety security standpoint. As far as I'm concerned, I feel comfortable and safe, but I just wouldn't want any, any issues or harm to come to my wife or my family.
Yeah. I think you expressed in your questionnaire you are married, you enjoy spending time with your children, and you also have some grandchildren. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And it was the concern not for yourself, but for the safety of those family members that you had some hesitation about serving as a juror here.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, it's a situation if individuals would end up knowing who I am or where I live or my family lives. There could be individuals that could cause harm or maybe some destruction to property, something like that. So I would have, those are the issues or concerns that I would have.
And you say concerns with your family, and I think I understand that. When you say potential destruction of property, can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Well, it would be, if certain individuals that were out to intimidate or cause harm, if they knew where I lived, it's potential they could, do damage to the house or spray paint the house or garage door or break a window or something like that from an intimidation or to create fear or something to that effect.
Okay. And you had indicated those concerns were something that would cause you to not be sure if you wanted to serve as a juror on this case. Can you explain how that would relate to jury service.
Well, you know, if I wasn't on the jury, I wouldn't have those concerns, obviously. This is an important case, and there's a lot of emotions tied up in it. And again, if I was a perspective, or if I was a juror on the case, I would have, you know, I would be looking forward or thinking about what some of the ramifications could be, especially if the identity was known.
And could you talk about what could be done to alleviate those concerns, if anything?
Well, the biggest thing is just staying anonymous or not having my identity known, and I think that would be the biggest one.
You indicated that your belief that this is an important case.
Yes, that's correct.
And would you agree that it's fair for both sides to expect that as the case proceeded, it would be able to receive 100% of your attention with no distractions?
Yes.
And that you would have to concentrate and pay attention to what is happening here in the courtroom 100% of the time. How difficult would it be for you to do that, given the concerns that you've expressed about safety and security with respect to your family and perhaps your property?
Well, as far as if I were to be involved in the case on the jury, I mean, I would definitely dedicate my time to the proceedings and what's going on. What happens when I go home or something like that, I mean, obviously I'm in a different mindset. And again, if there were some incidences at my house or to my wife or kids, I mean, that would take up, you know, obviously some of my thinking and my concerns. But as far as, you know, coming on a case, I would devote and dedicate my whole time on listening to the facts.
And so are you able to, you know, assure the court, the state, the defendant, that you would not be considering these safety concerns at the time you're seated and watching the evidence and paying attention? You would be able to completely put those out of your mind?
Yes.
I noticed that you have a prior military service.
Yes, Air National Guard.
What years?
That would have been in 70, 71, 72.
You were an enlisted person?
No, it was through the Air National Guard. So yes, I did enlist in that.
I meant as opposed to an officer. You held the rank
Yes.
of an enlisted man, serviceman.
Yes.
Thank you for your service. Was there a reason, any particular reason you chose to separate from the Air National Guard after your time of service?
Yeah, I ended up with an honorable discharge for medical reasons, and I wanted to continue on with college, finish my college degree.
I wanted to talk to you about another answer that you gave to a question on the questionnaire. When you were asked the question, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second-guess decisions they make while on the jury. Do you remember being asked that question?
Yes, if it was in the questionnaire, yes, I would have responded to it.
Okay. It sounds like there was a little hesitation. Maybe you don't remember that specific question?
Yes, I mean, I think the questionnaire was 20 pages long or something to that, that.
You didn't know you'd be quizzed on every individual
Yes.
answer?
Yeah, and it was a couple months ago, yes.
Sure. Typical lawyers, right? That's what we...
Right.
Well, so true to that, I'm going to quiz you on some specific
That's fine. That's
questions
fine.
you answered a long time ago.
Sure.
But that one in particular, because again, just like the answers you gave today and you reaffirmed under oath, It sounds like you took this pretty seriously when you responded to those questions,
Yes,
and you gave it some thought.
yes,
And you expressed a fairly strongly held opinion. You said you strongly agreed that because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, that it's not right to second guess the decisions that they make while on duty. You strongly agreed with that. And I'd like you to please just, for all of us here, explain that a little further.
yes, sure. No, I have a lot of respect for the police officers, sheriffs, and the department, and I know they go through training and get a lot of education in regard to their careers and their line of work, and I just feel that in the vast majority of the cases, they've got to make split-second decisions, and they make those. And again, it's hard to relate, not being in that particular situation, what the reaction would be. But again, they're trained in that, and I just respect their service, and how they help protect the community, and so it's tough to second guess. That's not to say that there could be some bad mistakes and decisions made, but I strongly believe that their actions in the majority of the cases are accurate.
And you say you strongly believe that. It sounds like this is something that maybe you've thought about before even answering the questionnaire, that you have a strong respect for law enforcement. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And would it be fair to say that you've held these beliefs for your entire adult life?
Yes.
And you agreed with the premise that law enforcement officers have very dangerous jobs. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And is because of that, what you strongly agreed with, it's just not right to second guess the decisions that the law enforcement officers make while they are on duty.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I explained earlier, I feel that they have to make split-second decisions in a lot of instances, and I trust their judgment in the vast majority of those situations.
So, sir, I'd like you to imagine a process by which you would be second-guessing officers, or a body would be second-guessing decisions that officers made, right? Mm-hmm. That there's a body, there's a group that's going to look at the actions of the officers and second-guess what they do. I take it from your deeply held belief, you would not choose to participate in a group like that. That sole purpose is to second-guess decisions that officers make while they're on duty.
No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I'd be looking at it from a position of what's right, what's wrong, and people make mistakes. I certainly understand that. So there could be mistakes that were made, and I'd be understanding of that.
I guess I need to hear a little bit more, just in your own words, sir, how you would be able to personally participate in, really, if you were a juror in this trial, second-guessing a decision that a police officer made in the course of their duties when you've expressed that you strongly disagree that one should even do that. How would you be able to participate?
Well, I think looking at the question, I would strongly disagree that people second guess police officers, but that's not to say that mistakes are made, and if mistakes are made, you've got to admit that.
And if a mistake is made by a police officer, do you believe that those mistakes should be handled in a criminal proceeding, or would it be more appropriate to be in some kind of an employment or administrative proceeding?
Well, it would depend on the extent of the mistake. If there's a serious issue or consequence that occurred, then it definitely bumps up to a more visible, more criminal type proceeding.
And so as you sit here and, only you know what's in your heart, right? Only you know what's in your mind, and we have to take your word for it. Are you able to assure the court, the defense, and the state that despite the fact that you strongly disagree that officers should be second guessed for decisions they make in the course of their duties, that you nonetheless would be able to be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
Yes. Yes, I mean, again, I'd be looking at from my beliefs, what's right, what's wrong, and relying on that condition.
Well, in terms of that, and I think that is certainly fair in terms of the question of whether or not you would be able to participate. But you understand, I hope, that were you able to participate as a juror, you would not be able to judge the case on your beliefs and what's right and wrong, correct?
Yes.
What is your understanding of what you would have to use to judge the merits of the case?
It would be the facts. It would be, it'd be the facts that are presented would determine, the outcome and what the case is about.
All right, I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor, and we will exercise a strike.
All right. Thank you, sir. You are excused from service on this jury.
Okay.
And you don't have to report back until we send you a summons perhaps in the future.
Okay.
The deputy will escort you out and also take some of your paperwork, and we'll go from there. Thank you for all your candid answers and your honesty.
Yep, thank you.
All right, I have that as state's number 1. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. All right. And now we're going to juror number 9. Wherever you want. Good afternoon. Have a seat.
Thank you. How's your lunch break?
Pretty good. How about yours?
Fine.
I'm glad we were able to provide you with lunch since
Yeah,
you had
thank
to
you.
stay
Really,
over.
I do really appreciate that.
Since this is, we know, never a precise where we get to everybody in the morning,
Yeah.
just as a safety net, we buy
Yeah,
a couple
I get it.
lunches.
Thank you.
So, all right. A couple things before I turn the questioning over to the attorneys. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all the questions and all the answers you give to the questions are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I swear.
All right, thank you. Okay, and we are going to be referring to you by number. No
Okay.
disrespect intended, it's just that it protects your privacy.
Yeah.
And the first thing I want to talk about is your questionnaire, which you received and filled out. Thank you for doing that. Is everything on that questionnaire true as far as you can recall?
Yeah, as far as I can recall, to the best of my ability, I try to take my time with it, so.
It appeared so, because you have a lot of extensive answers, so that's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
Sorry, I was kind of methodical about it, yeah.
No, the lawyers, I actually like that. You get a lot of answers, they get a lot of information.
Yeah.
Are there any changes or additions to the questionnaire? Because sometimes after it's sat for a while and you realize...
Yeah, when you think about a question like, oh, maybe not or whatever. I thought about that maybe if I read it again, but again, I tried to be pretty, like, I took my time. I really took my time with it. I didn't fill it out like right away when I got it. I took a few days, so.
Sounds like a very deliberative person.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, the attorneys are going to probably follow up, and so if something they ask you about in the questionnaire, you want to give it different or amend your answer, that's fine.
Okay.
Not like you're going to get in trouble or anything.
Okay.
It's very natural that you fill out the questionnaire and then other things come to mind.
Right.
Now, since you filled out the questionnaire, you have some familiarity with the facts of this case from the media, I assume. And The questionnaire specifically advised you to avoid any further media about it, or to read about it or investigate. And the question is, sometimes inadvertently, jurors will see a headline, or someone will talk to them and provide new information you are not aware of. Has anything like that happened since you filled out the questionnaire and today in court? Any new facts you've learned or other?
No, nothing new, just kind of repetitive stuff that you'd seen multiple times or whatever. But
Okay.
yeah, nothing new that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, excellent. Now, you have to decide the case only on what you hear and see in the courtroom, so we acknowledge that everybody, just about everybody has seen or heard about this case. Maybe even formed opinions, maybe even formed strong opinions about the case. But what you have to do as a juror is decide the case only on what you hear in the courtroom, the evidence, and based on the law, and apply the law as I give it to you. Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
Okay. And did you recognize any of the witnesses who are on the witness list?
No.
All right. And the length of the trial, we're anticipating that if you were on the jury, that you would report back after today, March 29th, and the trial would be about 4 weeks.
Okay.
That's our best estimate.
Okay.
Does that work for you? Can
Yeah.
you okay. So no personal obligations that would cause that to be a problem?
I would set them aside. This is more important.
Okay, excellent. Anything else I should know before I turn you over to the attorneys?
No, nothing I can think of. Just with my medical condition, my type 1 diabetes, obviously, like, there's breaks that are taken and stuff, right? So I would get a chance to, like, check my blood sugar and everything during it. Wouldn't be like, we'd be here from, like, 8 a.m. to, like, 6 p.m., like, no break or anything like that.
I think I couldn't stand that.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna make
Yeah.
a juror do that.
Naturally, people need to, like, eat and stuff. So, yeah, just that, pretty much. As long as there would be, like, every, at least, like, once or whatever, I'd be able to get a chance to go take care of that. That would be it.
I'll just give you an idea. We rarely go beyond an hour and a half of testimony without a 20-minute break.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's really short. Okay.
And then, of course, we have a lunch break. And if we go into the evening, which would be a rare occasion,
Yeah.
there'd be a dinner break. But
Perfect. Okay, that was my only concern.
okay, one last thing. Generally, Mr. Nelson's going to be first to ask you questions. We are taking down a record of everything, so if you could use yes and no, which you seem to be doing just fine, as opposed to mm-hmm or uh-huh.
Yeah.
And also to make sure that you aren't talking over each other, because that's really hard for Ms. Carmichael, our court reporter. So it formalizes things a little much, but if you could try and do that, I'd appreciate that.
Understandable.
All right, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Yes, thank you.
And if you'd like, you can remove your mask.
Okay.
It's up to you, whichever you would.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being here today. And I wanted to thank you for your very insightful answers on the questionnaire.
No problem.
I'm going to just kind of ask you some general questions first. I'm going to follow up with some specific answers on your questionnaire, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's assume you and I were to meet in a different setting, a social setting of some sort. We were to start talking. What are a few things you'd want me to walk away knowing about you?
Personality-wise, or
I'm sorry, and I'm just, oh, here we go. However, I mean, what do you like to do? What's your personality like? What would I walk away with knowing about juror number 9?
well, I think that having type 1 diabetes is probably my main thing. If I were to, like, become friends with you, I'd want you to know that in case any concern, in case I would want you, to know. That I'm I would consider, go with the flow, open-minded type of person. Yeah, I feel like I'm just the type of person that I can have a conversation with anybody about anything. And, like, whether we agree or disagree, we can be mature adults and have a conversation, and then that be it, and go about our day.
Excellent. So when you first received your jury notice, what was your initial reaction? What were
I
you-
was super excited.
excited.
Yeah, that's actually why I voted. So I was really surprised when I got back feedback right away. I was really excited. I didn't know what it was. I didn't care what it was. I was just excited to be summoned.
Okay. Why? What is it about jury duty that you find exciting?
First of all, I just find the whole jury court process fascinating, period. And also, I find it, you know how it said, like, it's your civic duty and whatnot, and I find that very true. But most people, I think of it as an annoyance or hindrance on their everyday, but this is like what you decide, or you and a group of people decide, can determine the outcome of someone's life. Whether it be guilty or not guilty, that decision alone can affect their life for the rest of their life. So it's important for people who are going to take the time and be responsible about it and really like think it over, think it through, and make a proper decision. And yeah, instead of just be like, oh, I want to get back to work tomorrow and try to get out of there. So yeah.
Do you think that a jury's decision affects people other than the defendant?
Absolutely.
How so?
Because also those people's lives can be affected. Say someone gets sent to jail, prison, whatever, and they're the breadwinner of the house, you know? So now that other partner, whoever else, has to find income, they have to take time to go visit that person. It just affects everybody's life in many, many, many different ways.
What about if there were to be an acquittal?
I think it also affects that person, because even if someone is not guilty, they're just being accused of something, most people just assume, oh, yep, they did it. So that person is going to have a hard time walking around town knowing, you know, people just judge you right off the bat without any facts or anything. So somebody could be acquitted, found not guilty by a jury of their peers, and they still can't go to the grocery store without being harassed for whether it not be a long time, could be the rest of their life. Some people have probably moved towns because that has affected them. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Okay. So in this case, you're obviously familiar with why you're here in this case, right?
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah. What about Mr. Floyd's family? How do you think a decision would affect a victim's family?
I think it would affect a victim's family in the case where, if, again, they assume that that person's guilty and they're found not, they can be hurt, they can feel like they weren't heard, or that their person that, you know, George Floyd wasn't important enough to people for them to make what they would consider the right decision, and certain things like that.
Okay. And so do you think that you can listen to all of the evidence in this case, both sides of the story, and base your decision on the evidence? Or would you be more concerned and focused on the effects of your decision on Mr. Chauvin or Mr. Floyd's family?
I think I could make an impartial decision based off of the evidence, yes.
Okay, great. Can you think of a situation, I'm going to go back, I'm sorry. So you were super excited to get your jury questionnaire. When you realized the case that it involved, did that opinion change?
No, I was still just as excited, even more so, just knowing that this is, it was a huge deal at the time. It still is. It's a very important case, not just for, you know, Hennepin County or whatever, but just nationwide. A lot of different people feel very strongly about it on both sides, or, you know, either way, in the middle, whatever. It's just something that, again, everyone's heard about, everyone's talked about, and everyone is going to hear about for even long after the trial is over. No matter what the decision, people are going to still talk about it. So it's just something very important to, it seems like, everyone.
Okay. Do you have any concerns for your own personal safety?
Yes and no, I guess. I maybe haven't thought about my own personal safety in this matter as much as maybe I should, but I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought about it. I understand where it could be at risk, but I'm not as concerned about it as I probably should be.
Okay. How did you feel when you came to court today and you saw the current condition of this building?
Everyone outside, you mean? I was surprised, actually. Yesterday was when we came, and then we got, you know, dismissed early and had to come back, but I was kind of shocked. I wasn't expecting people to be out here already, considering the actual trial doesn't start until the 29th, so I think people have maybe jumped the gun a little bit, but that's okay, to each their own. But yeah, I was actually surprised.
So you're referring like to the protesters and things like that?
Yeah.
how did you feel about, you know, seeing the barricades and the soldiers?
I mean, I guess since we already went through that a lot last year, didn't really make me feel any type of way. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, you know, just like as expected.
Okay. So can you think of a circumstance in your life where you have been called upon to resolve conflict between two people?
Yeah. My friends like to consider me a type of mediator. I'm always kind of like the level-headed one that's like, all right, so this is what this person's saying now, do you understand? And then I kind of like get both sides to at least understand where that other side is coming from. Again, whether they agree or not, understanding is more important than agreeance, I think. So yeah, I'm usually the mediator between people.
And so how do you approach that situation? How do you mediate?
I usually just try to, whoever is the more worked up, whoever's the more frustrated, to me it seems like that person wants to be heard more at the time. So I'll be like, all right, what's your frustration? What's going on? Then they'll talk. I'll be like, all right, so do you understand why they feel like that? And if they don't, then I'll be like, okay, could you elaborate, you know? And then kind of go back and forth. But I usually start with like the person that's like the most upset, get them to try to get their words out and everything and be understood, because I feel like usually people just want to be heard is mainly the problem when people are upset.
So in terms of that dispute, how do you resolve the dispute between, if there's a dispute? Somebody says, this is what happened, somebody else said, this is what happened, how do you resolve that dispute?
Yeah, I don't know, I guess maybe just like from a logical standpoint. Everything's situational. Things aren't black and white, I don't think. So yeah, just depending on the situation and what would seemingly make the most sense to resolve, so either both parties are happy or at least the person who might, in my opinion, be in the right, you know, is happy. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want. So whether they take your advice or not, that's just kind of on them.
So I guess, ma'am, what I'm asking you is a little different. You have been called to sort of referee, right? Not necessarily calm people down, but to decide who's telling the truth. How do you decide when someone is telling the truth?
I think that body language, mannerisms, all of that is really important. Also, if you know that person's character, in this case, obviously I wouldn't know anyone's character, but in my personal cases, if you know that person's character, you know if they're maybe more prone to lying or telling the truth or what have you. So, but yeah, I feel like body language is a really big one for sure.
Okay. What about like extra evidence, right? Like, would you talk to other people? What would you do? How would you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if deemed necessary, absolutely, and see, like, could you corroborate this story or what have you?
Have you ever had a situation where you were certain about something and later found out you were wrong?
Of course.
Can you give me an example of that?
I can't give you an example off the top of my head. I'm sure I mean, we're human beings. We all have our certainties, and then we're proven wrong later on.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about COVID-19 sitting in this trial?
No.
So I'm just going to ask you a few questions about your questionnaire here.
Okay.
So you're familiar generally with the story, right?
Yes.
What is alleged to have occurred back in
Yes.
May. You've watched the video only one time. By the video, the Facebook video.
Yes.
There's a question on the questionnaire that says, from what you've seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant, Mr. Chauvin? And you said somewhat negative, and then it asks you, why do you feel that way? And there was no response. Why did you answer that you have a somewhat negative impression of Mr. Chauvin?
Again, just from, that's the only thing I've ever seen of this person, and that video, you know, just makes you sad. I feel like it's just, nobody wants to see somebody die, whether it was like his fault or not. Nobody wants to see that, you know, it's just hard to watch something. So, yeah, and of course, obviously, you see all of these people talking and saying things and coming at someone's character on social media and stuff, so the perception that you're given is negative, but then when you actually think back on it, you're like, okay, I don't know this person though, so I feel like this, but again, I could be proven wrong or whatever. So, but yeah, just from the interpretation of social media and, you know, like what people say on Facebook and stuff like that, your family, your friends or whatever is, yeah.
And so you've talked with your family and friends about this situation before you
Yeah,
felt
like
this-
when it first happened, like right away.
Okay. And have you had a lot of conversations about it since?
No, not really.
Okay. You also indicated that, and there's a question that says, do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since Mr. Floyd's death? And you said somewhat positive. Could you explain that for me?
Read the question again. I'm sorry.
Sure. Do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since Mr. Floyd's death?
And I said somewhat positive, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think just in the idea of recognizing that some people are unfortunately discriminated against, and it is a thing that happens. And so just positive in the sense of just like awareness, pretty much. Because I mean, I'm sure seeing something like that was some people's first like visual of being like, oh, somebody's been discriminated against. I've actually never seen that, so I didn't know it was a real thing. So yeah, just in the sense of, for the first time, some people might have seen that something bad can happen to somebody because they look or are a certain way.
Right. I mean, I don't want to press you, but I guess the question is, you formed an opinion that discrimination was occurring when you watched that video.
That it's a possibility, I think.
Okay.
Or not even in that, just that stuff like that happens. I guess I don't really know how to explain what I'm trying to say.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you are recognizing that that's one possible explanation for what happened.
Yes, it's a possible explanation.
Can you think of other possible explanations?
As to why that happened. Maybe that person was, you know, again, if an officer is on top of you or something, you were possibly resisting arrest, you were fighting back, they felt the need to in that situation, that they or someone else's civilians' lives could have been in danger if they didn't put this person in, you know,
Okay.
that type of thing.
So you're open to exploring alternative
Yes.
options for whatever happened.
Yes,
And you're willing to hear all of the evidence.
yes, I want to,
You want to. And there are two sides to every story, agreed?
absolutely.
Would you be able to keep your mind open until you hear both sides?
Absolutely,
You have a relative who is a police officer?
yes,
Is he or she, is he a police officer here in the metro area?
no, up north in Brainerd.
Do you talk to your relative about that?
About him being an officer? Yeah, I ask him questions and stuff, just like stuff I would like to know, not like any racial bias stuff, just random questions like, what would I do if I got pulled over? And, you know, that kind of thing. So I'll just ask him questions to help me get out of trouble a little bit.
Okay, fair enough. It's always good to know police, right?
Right, exactly. It is. It's good to know lots of different types of people.
So let me say if you were a juror on this case, and, well, before I ask you that question, have you talked to your relative who is a police officer about this case?
I have not.
Do you see that person frequently?
During holidays, I wouldn't say so frequent, you know, major holidays.
So if you were a juror on this case, and you were learning about certain training techniques, would you call up your relative and be like, hey, is this right?
Well, I know we're not allowed to talk about the case, so I wouldn't.
Okay.
But, I mean, maybe if it was, yeah, I probably just wouldn't. I would wait till after or something.
Okay. There was a couple of questions. You've had some martial arts training.
Very little.
Okay. Nothing of any, you're not a black belt? or-
No, no extensive training whatsoever.
Okay. But they asked a question, is during a martial arts training class, you actually were put into some type of a restraint or chokehold?
Yeah, that was one of the things. I don't know if it was necessarily a chokehold, but like it was like around and then like arm around neck. What happens if you get in this position and how to get out of it. That's what it was.
Okay.
But they weren't like extreme about it. Like they didn't actually choke you out or anything. Just like you could feel like the pressure on your neck and how to get out of it.
Okay. There were a series of questions about that kind of asked you to rank your opinion from a 1 to a 5, from a strongly agree to strongly disagree. I just have a couple of questions about that, your answers on that. One of the questions was, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system. And you said you strongly agreed with that. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I just feel like there's a lot of documents and things you can look up that can kind of prove that as evidence, just statistics and stuff like that you can look up, and like the incarceration rate versus the actual population of that amount of people in, the nation and whatnot. Just a lot of statistics and stuff can
support
agree
that?
with, yeah, can support that.
Okay. There was a question specifically to the Minneapolis Police Department, that Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than when dealing with white suspects, and you somewhat agreed with that. Have you a personal experience in terms of friends or?
Yeah, not me personally, but I know people that they have had poor experiences. And where I grew up, which is northern Minnesota, where there's not nearly the amount of policing and everything like that, just a really small town and stuff, and I hardly saw it, so I just kind of assumed it was a big city thing, I guess. But yeah, not from my personal experiences, just from what I've heard from close people.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about the Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. Do you recall your responses, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I think I said something like, I like the idea of what they're supposed to stand for, but I think that's been turned into a propaganda scheme by companies and stuff just to get you to buy their stuff. So to me, it's just like, say Nike or whoever is like, yeah, we love black people, Black Lives Matter, but it's like, come buy our stuff now. You know what I mean? So that's really what I think it is, honestly.
Sure. So you think it's turned into like a marketing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And Blue Lives Matter, similar?
Yeah, same thing. Black Lives Matter was already a thing, and they just piggybacked off of the same letter hashtag, so they're literally just the same thing.
Okay. I have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we have just a brief sidebar?
Sure. Juror 9, I am going to find under Minnesota Rule of Criminal Procedure 26.02 that we're going to ask some questions, and I think your legitimate privacy interests merit that it kind of be without the audio playing. So we're not going to go into depth, but I think it's appropriate that we turn off the audio so that we can ask you some questions. Basically about your diet.
Thank you for your concerns.
Good afternoon. Juror number 9.
Good afternoon.
So you're a former 218er, I understand?
Yes.
All right. And you grew up in northern Minnesota there most of your life?
Yes.
And I saw that the place you grew up, did you grow up in the same area where you have a relative who's a police officer?
Where he is a police officer is he lives pretty far away. So I grew up in the same area as where he lives, but not where he actually is an officer.
All right, so you didn't have to have any concern that he'd be the one pulling you over
No.
or doing anything?
Unless I was obviously driving through that county or whatever, but no.
Sure. Can you please just share with us how much contact you have with your uncle? I don't know how many uncles you have or how big your family
Yeah,
is.
again, major holidays, so, you know, like Christmas, Thanksgiving, those kinds of things, birthdays. And then I'll randomly text him, call him or whatever, hit him up, just if I have a question about something, or I'm like, oh, hey, I got a ticket, da-da-da-da-da, you know, just that kind of thing. So, yeah, I have a good relationship with him.
All right. Aside from major family gatherings and occasionally asking him for advice, is this a relative you have regular contact with? Like you would see him once a month?
No.
Once a week?
No, not that often.
I need to ask you, just with having a family member as a law enforcement officer, do you think, as you sit here today, that you might credit the testimony of a police officer more than that of just another citizen, say a bystander?
No.
And why is that? Why do you think that you'd be able to evaluate each person's testimony?
Well, I guess I would just hope that they're supposed to be under oath, so they're not lying, whether they're, you know, an officer or not. I would just hope that they're telling the truth, plain and simple.
Okay. And so, do you believe then, as you just kind of search your mind, that despite the fact that one of the witnesses wears the uniform, is a law enforcement officer, that witness's testimony would be on equal footing as, say, just a passerby?
Yeah.
And your reason for that is because everybody's under oath.
Well, that, and also, I mean, I just think if someone sees what they saw, maybe people exaggerate sometimes, but I would just think if they would, I don't know, I guess I just would trust that they're going to be honest, even if it was brief sighting or a long, they witnessed the whole event, they'd just be honest about it.
So let me ask you then, if you're confronted with a situation as a juror in which witness A testifies a certain way and witness B testifies a completely different way. Witness B is a law enforcement officer, witness A is not. What would you use to distinguish and determine which person is telling the truth?
Assuming that one of them is lying, or again, I guess the body language, the way people talk, if they seem like they're nervous, not just because like this is a situation where you're just kind of naturally anxious or nervous, but they're nervous like I need to say this certain thing or whatever, you know. I guess just the human perception of that person's mannerisms and body language. A lot. People can tell you a lot without actually telling you a lot.
I want to talk to you a little bit about something you outlined as some prior knowledge that you have about this case. And I believe that you got this knowledge from media sources. And you indicated that when an autopsy came out, people were talking about how he, meaning George Floyd, had drugs in his system. And that's something that you made note of. Was that information you paid particular attention to?
No, I'd never like seeked that out. I just, you know, when you see it in like comments and stuff and people are like, oh, well, he had such and such in his system. And it's like, oh, you know, and then you just like keep going by and you just, people want to bring that up and make it important, whether it is or not, people decide, you know? So yeah, that was pretty much just it.
You know, some people might comment on something like that, that someone who dies and they have drugs in their system, they have themselves to blame. How would you respond to a comment like that? What do you believe?
situational, I think everything is, but I don't know. I don't really necessarily agree with that statement. If someone had drugs in their system and they were in a situation where that would exacerbate the things, that could be the thing, or maybe it was the thing, maybe it was the drugs. Again, you never know. Everything is situational. That could have everything to do with it, or it could have absolutely nothing to do with it.
Getting back to a situation where you say you're at a family gathering and you see your uncle and you've served as a juror in this case. And if the evidence proved guilt and there was a conviction, do you think that it would be difficult for you to have a conversation about this with your uncle?
No, I don't think so.
How hard do you think it would be for you to justify your service to your uncle if a conviction were returned?
I mean, he knows me, and he knows that I wouldn't just base something off of feelings and off of one piece of information or evidence. He knows that if it were to come to a conclusion, and if that were the case, that I would hope he would know that, it was all thought through, and it wasn't just me, obviously, that came to the conclusion. It was 11 other people or whatever. So, yeah, I would just...
And would his opinion be important to you?
It would, but it wouldn't make a difference if it would be. I mean, his opinion is important to me, but not so much so that it would sway my decision either way.
And are there other members of your family who might feel the same way as your uncle, who you would have any concern explaining after the fact what your decision was?
My family knows who I am, and they know I'm not going to go back on what I think or feel, regardless of their thoughts of me or my decisions.
One thing I'd like to follow up on, and I think you made it clear when defense counsel was asking you questions about your ability to put opinions aside, right, and judge the case on its merits, and I think you said you could do that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the answer you gave, was absolutely. When the judge questioned you about that earlier, you said, and I quote, "I think I could be fair." And I need to make sure that we're very clear, because sometimes people, maybe from northern Minnesota, don't say things as affirmatively, right?
Yeah.
It's always "I think," or "that's pretty good." And so I just need to know, as you sit here today, can you be fair to both sides and set aside any opinions or preconceived notions you have about this case and decide it based solely on the evidence that's presented to you and the instructions that the court gives you?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Pastor Collins?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You're moving on this jury.
Awesome.
Accordingly, I'm going to ask that you report back here on March 29th,
Okay.
and at 9 a.m. for now.
Okay.
You'll probably get more instructions. And in case that date changes, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
As you've already experienced,
Yeah.
there are delays. We are pretty confident, though, that we'll be ready to go on that date
Okay.
with the actual evidence in the trial itself. So, in the meantime, you're not an investigator. Do not
Yes.
go out looking. Do not avoid all media to the extent you can. And then we'll see you back here. Well, one thing you need to keep with you is that letter with the sticker on it and your number,
Okay.
because that's your pass to get in here. And so it's very important that you keep that safe and bring it with you.
Okay. And
Yeah.
just in case, will I be getting another letter to remind me of the date and time and everything, or is there a number I should call?
You can always call the jury number. Generally, if there's a change, we reach out to you.
Okay.
We might do that in this case in any event, just because it's going to be 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we'll probably send a reminder call to everybody. But if you don't hear from us, you can always call back. But also, March 29th at 9 o'clock.
Sounds good. Thank you
Okay,
very much,
any
sir.
questions?
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
then you can go with the deputy.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. We have, the next group is a new group to read the initial instructions, so we're gonna do that. I'm just curious if you have any sense for how many we'll be able to get through before the end of the day at 4:30. Keeping in mind we have a 20-minute break probably after the next juror. That was juror number 9, which is a grand total of 6 for the day. I'm thinking of keeping 3. We're off the record, by the way, but we can stay on. We can stay on audio and video, but we're off the record.
Judge, I think 3 to 4 at the most, taking a look, probably 3 is more realistic, let's do 3.
Mr. Nelson, you,
I'm just taking a peek here quick at my
okay.
notes. I'd say 3 to 4. Keep 4, one of them.
Okay. Let's keep the first 4 after this and cut the next 2 loose for 9 o'clock tomorrow.
Cut them loose now.
No, let's do all,
Right.
do the review on all 6.
Okay.
Send all of them back. But
Except for
cut-
23 and 26.
Correct. Okay, and the deputies. Are they bringing everybody in?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, members of the panel, if you could just kind of spread out and take any seat that works for you. And you can, it's not like church, you can sit in the front row if you'd like. Excellent. All right, thank you. You may be seated. Well, good afternoon. First of all, can you all hear me? Because if you cannot, we have hearing assistance devices. All right, I'm seeing that everybody seems to be able to hear. My name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the district court. And you have been summoned, as you know, as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure that the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First, thank you for filling out and returning the questionnaire that was mailed to you. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best assured by continuing to provide full and complete answers to the questions that you will be asked today and possibly tomorrow. Those questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what is called cause. Not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense to any question that you might be asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore some opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. During trial, charges may be added to or subtracted from these charges because that's in the normal course, but those are the charges as it stands today. Now, to the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. And I'm going to have the participants introduce themselves in the case, beginning with the attorneys for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, my name is Steve Slisher on behalf of the state of Minnesota.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
I'm Joshua Larson, I'm also with the state. Thank you.
And Mr. Nelson, if you could introduce yourself and your team.
Good afternoon, my name is Eric Nelson, I'm the attorney for Derek Chauvin. Behind me is my assistant, Amy Voss.
Okay, thank you. Now, there may be other attorneys from the state also appearing, and so I'll ask you to keep in mind whether you know Matthew Frank, Attorney General Keith Ellison, Aaron Eldridge, Attorney Jerry Blackwell, or anybody else who works for the Attorney General's office. Is there anybody who has that familiarity? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Does anybody recognize anybody who was in the courtroom who has introduced themselves, any of the parties or attorneys? All right, I'm seeing no hands. Now, you have been given a copy, well, actually, did anybody recognize anybody in the courtroom, I should say, not just the parties or attorneys? Okay, no hands. You have been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses, a rather long list, I acknowledge. And if you have reviewed it, you'll be asked when you are questioned individually whether you know anybody on that list. So please keep the list with you when you come in for your individual questioning. And if you've marked anybody, we'd like to know that. Now, before I turn it over to the attorneys, you have to keep in mind that one of the things they may not do in jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him. And in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinary persons would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Now, if you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect. But in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome, relationship to the parties, the ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out and do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers or the witnesses. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, witnesses, or spectators do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you during except through the normal processes of jury selection, and they will confine themselves to a brief greeting. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. And since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, but please do not publish any information about the case or your thoughts about the case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case will receive media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. Now, this trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, and I specifically order that the audio not be broadcast. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. So with that, I'm going to send all of you back into the waiting room area, except for juror number 10, and you can remain behind. And Mr. Schaefer has further instructions for several of you. So if you go with the deputy. Okay, juror 10, if you could come up here to the witness stand. And I'll put my mask back on. Okay. Apologies, I'm a little missing one of my sheets. All right, before I turn it over to the attorneys, I want to go over a few things. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I will.
All right, thank you. First of all, you did fill out a questionnaire. Thank you for taking the time to do that. The first question I have, was everything true on that questionnaire?
To the best of my ability at the time.
All right, and you kind of anticipated my next question, which is, do you have any changes or additions to the questionnaire? Because sometimes after you've had a chance to reflect on it, after you turn it in, things come up or you realize something was inaccurate. You're not going to get in trouble by correcting it. It's what we're looking for is the honest feedback from you. And so if there is anything, can you think of anything right now?
Well, the one question where it asks, do you want to serve on this jury?
Correct.
And I put down not sure, but the more I think about things, I guess my answer would be no.
Okay, tell me about that. What has kind of moved you in that direction?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the publicity that's going to be associated with this case. And the potential, I guess the potential outcome of this case can, I mean, this is going to be a very highly publicized case. And there's a lot riding on this case. And to me, I read in the article, or the information you sent us, that jurors' names will be publicized after the case is done.
At some point, yes.
At some point, right. And that kind of raised the issue with me, because I felt, well, if our names are publicized, could we become potential targets for certain organizations? And that has makes me feel uneasy.
A little apprehensive.
Right, exactly.
Okay. I think you also mentioned the concerns about COVID-19, and we've done everything the health department said we should, but nevertheless, are those concerns enough that it might bother you during trial?
Well, at the time I filled the questionnaire out, we were under lockdown. And so at that point in time, it was a very serious concern of mine because we didn't know where we were going with this, with COVID-19. But at this point in time, my reservations are somewhat relieved with the
Okay.
vaccines, probably getting some herd immunity out there and more lifting of restrictions. I believe I'm a little more at ease on that now at this point.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you are in the accounting industry,
Correct.
and this is busy time.
Busy time.
Do you think that it's so busy that you're probably going to be working after court sessions?
I would probably have to, and it would probably, I do travel somewhat with my job, to my clients. So given the potential length of a trial, it may impact my ability to service clients completely. Because if I travel, I can't be here and be there at the same time.
Right. And we do anticipate that the trial would be about 4 weeks, starting on March 29th. What do you think with that time frame?
It's a pretty bad time.
Okay. Let me return to your safety concerns. And I'm not questioning the legitimacy of the concerns you have. Not saying one way or the other, what the likelihood of any concern should be. But the fact that it is a concern for you, if you're on the jury, you can't let that seep in and affect your decision. So in other words, you can't say, well, I think that it's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, so I could vote for guilty, but I'm a little worried what'll happen. Or the opposite. I don't feel it's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and so I should find him not guilty, but I don't know what'll happen. Do you think that's a concern that we should be thinking about?
Well, I feel I'm a reasonable person and can separate facts from fiction. However, that thought, I believe, would still be there, yes.
All right.
I don't know if it would influence me. I mean, I would try not to, but, if it's in your, if you're thinking about these things, how can you just eliminate it from your mind, let's just say.
Okay. I'm just gonna talk to the lawyers privately for just a quick second, so hang tight. Juror number 10. I'm going to excuse you from this jury, and I'll tell you, it's mostly I'm concerned that we are in your high season of work, and if you're working after hours, the last person I had on a jury who did that fell asleep during the trial, which is not something we ever like. But also that combined with your safety concerns and how that would weigh on your mind while hearing evidence, I think it's appropriate. I'm going to excuse you from this panel. And so you're relieved from jury duty for this round and until you get a summons years from now. Okay? The deputy on the way out will collect some things from you, but otherwise, thank you for your candid answers and taking the time to fill out the questionnaire.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. All right. sir, have a seat. All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you a few questions before we turn it over to the attorneys. First of all, I have to swear you in to make sure that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right, thank you. If I could have you pull up right to the microphone to make sure that we can capture things. My hearing is not what it used to be. First question I'm going to ask you is, you filled out the questionnaire, and thank you for doing so. Was everything on that questionnaire true as far as your answers?
Am I on a time limit here? Can I just think about it? I'm just trying to put my thoughts together, not trying to,
You take whatever time you need to
Okay.
answer the question. And since you filled it out quite a while ago, well, if there's anything, that's fine. It's just a question of if something comes up, I want you to feel free to add to it or change it. You're not going to get in trouble. Because very often people fill out a questionnaire and then they reflect and they go, well, probably should have said this or that. And that generally will come up more in the questions that the lawyers will be asking. But in the interim, if there was something that you came in saying, well, once I get in front of the judge, I got to tell him this. Anything like that?
could you just repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, is there anything in that questionnaire that just right now you think you need to change or amend?
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay. And if anything does come to your mind during the questioning, feel free to volunteer. All right. When you filled out the questionnaire, there was an advisory not to read any articles or follow this in the media. Sometimes, inadvertently, you get exposed despite your best efforts. You see a headline, maybe a friend says, oh, did you hear about this part of the case? Did anything like that happen to you? Were you exposed to any substance or facts about this case, or anything about the process or the people involved between when you filled out the questionnaire and now?
I've had people bring it up around me when we were spending some time together, and I didn't add to the conversation or mention anything about my jury service.
Okay. Was that uncomfortable for you?
I just took it as a sign just to not say anything
Okay.
or say little, nothing about the jury at all.
All right. Fair enough. And you know something about this case, because just about everybody who comes in here knows something about the case, or at least have certain thoughts about the case based on what they've read or seen in the media. But if you're on the jury, you have to put all that aside on what you hear and see in the courtroom. Do you think you could do that?
Yeah, I think I could do it.
Okay. And we really put you in a tough spot because we say, you don't know much about the case except what you've read, and that might not be accurate. So can you put it all aside, and we're asking, with very little other indication of what the evidence is, we're asking you to give us your best guess on whether you can put everything aside. And your answer is yes, you can.
I'm really this is a lot to me right now. I could take the facts together and set everything aside, all my biases and all that, but this this process is making me kind of uncomfortable.
Sure.
And just a lot to take in at the same time.
In fact, I'll go right to that, because the last question of the questionnaire was, why do you feel or you said, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And the answer was no. Too much responsibility, don't want to be a part of a trial the whole nation will be paying attention to. Personal opinion conflicts with participating as a juror. I'm in trade school, and COVID-19 has been cutting into my education. So there's a lot to unwrap there. And how old are you?
I'm 19.
So, you're 19, we catch you right after you become eligible to vote and serve on a jury. And it sounds like this seems like an intimidating prospect for you.
Yeah.
Is that a fair, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Well, it's not causing me fear, but it's just making
No.
me anxious and just,
Okay.
I'm just trying to think about like further on down the road, like how things are gonna be, because when I came here today, like I couldn't even see the parking. I didn't even realize that it was being guarded, and there was a draw gate. So and that was something new for me too. All the barricades around the building.
Okay. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the attorneys to ask you some more follow-up questions about that. So I'm going to ask Mr. Nelson to inquire.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for being here today, and I appreciate your sensitivity and concerns, and this is a this is a lot to take in, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you some questions, want to follow up on a few things, and not in trouble, no one's trying to trick you, we're just trying to get to whether you'd be a good juror for this case. Not only for Mr. Chauvin, but also for the state of Minnesota. You understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you and I were to meet in a social situation, tell me 2 or 3 things you'd want me to know about you after that conversation.
Is this like a casual conversation, or like do I know like what your occupation is?
No, we're just talking, 2 guys talking.
I like to think about things on a deeper level. I like to conceptualize. I'm very interested in talking about I'm very open-minded. I like to think about more things other than what's just present at the moment. I'm not really sure what you're asking for.
I think you answered what I was asking for, and I
Okay.
appreciate your response, okay? When you first got the notice that you were gonna be doing jury, or called for jury service, what was your first reaction to that notice?
Like, why me? I didn't think it was. I didn't think I'd be somebody that could be selected for this case. It was never a thought in my mind until I saw it on the paper and filled out the questionnaire.
So you kind of had a why me moment.
Yeah.
Did you ponder that question, and what did you come up with?
There's a lot of philosophical things I could say, but I'm just gonna say it was just a random selection. The machine or whatever picked my number or picked my license, however it goes, and that's the reason why I'm here right now. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I'm also curious as to the philosophical response.
I don't know. Maybe I was just chosen to be a part of this trial. Just, like, how do I explain it? Just the way my life has been going, just the experiences I had, kind of just doesn't feel like a coincidence that I'm here, a part of this trial.
So is it that you know, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or trivialize anything, but you sort of feel like a purpose or a higher calling or some reason that you were chosen to be, even though it's a random process to select people?
I wouldn't say it's like my purpose to be here. I just think maybe for whatever reason it is, I'm here right now. Maybe there's something I need to learn from the series of events, or something I gotta see for myself to know. I don't know. That's what I was trying to say with the philosophical. Like, it's just it's case by case. I don't have a direct answer to everything. It's just I guess it's just how I'm feeling at that time, and like what answers I can give to it when
Okay. I appreciate that. So I guess you obviously know the case.
yeah.
You know why you're here. And you formed some opinions about the case, personal opinions, right?
Yeah.
And because I believe in your response answering why you didn't want to be a juror was because of your opinions. Your personal opinions conflict with participating as a jury.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
I feel like this this whole process is just gonna what's the word I'm thinking of? It's gonna snowball. It's gonna like get bigger and bigger as the days go by, and I don't know if I want to deal with all what comes with that, the media attention, the people outside the courthouse, of the guards and stuff. It's just, it's a lot for me to take in.
Sir, I understand that it's a very intimidating process.
Yeah.
That's probably even more intimidating because of the virtue of this case, and it's even more intimidating by virtue of the maelstrom of events surrounding it, right? But have you formed personal opinions about what happened back in May?
Yeah.
And your response to why you don't want to be a juror in this case is because you feel conflicted based on those personal opinions. Is that fair?
Yeah. I kind of feel like I feel like I'd be more willing to participate. I mean, I'm participating right now, but I feel like I wouldn't be so conflicted to participate if it was a different case.
So I guess I'm just going to ask you outright, what are your personal opinions about this case?
I think this whole thing is just very divisive. Me being a part of this case kind of feels like to me that I'm adding to the divisiveness, not necessarily saying that that it's done on purpose. It's just I just think forward in the future about how like what my life is gonna be like after the case, and like if people are gonna, you know, see videos or know that I was there. There's a lot of people I know, and I just don't want them to know that I was a juror on the case. I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to discuss it with other people like that.
So the bottom line.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess the bottom line is that we're trying to determine if you could be a fair and an impartial juror in this case. Would your opinions prevent you from being a fair and an impartial juror?
I'm not sure, because I don't know, do you just want me to tell you some things I think and we go from there? Because,
Sure.
Mark, what would you like to know first?
Why don't you tell me some things that you think, and we'll go from there.
From what I know, the MPD has a history of corruption and just, I just hear that there's a lot of bad cops in the MPD. I just don't trust. I don't really trust law enforcement like that. I just feel a little bit intimidated when they come around.
So can I just interrupt you, because we're gonna kind of go back and forth, right?
Yeah.
As I understand, you said that the Minneapolis Police Department, in your opinion, has a history of corruption.
Yeah.
And do you have personal experience with that, or do you have friends who've had experience with that, or is that predicated on what people talk about?
Part of it is just from what I heard and, past things that happened in Minneapolis, but also because my dad was racially profiled in a traffic stop, and he doesn't break the law.
So you have a family member who has had a negative experience with the Minneapolis Police Department.
Yeah.
Okay. So just looking at your role here as a juror would be to be fair and impartial, to listen to evidence, all of the evidence as it's presented, and weigh the question of guilty or not guilty based on what you see in court. Do you think that you could set aside your personal experiences and your belief of corruption or history of corruption about the Minneapolis Police Department aside as you weigh this question?
I'm conflicted. I can be impartial, but I could be fair and impartial, but I just don't know if I could stay like that, present with all the evidence that I'm going to be seeing and all that. I don't know. I don't know what the evidence is.
Here's what we're gonna do. It's time for our afternoon break. We normally take a 20-minute break at this time. So I'm gonna ask that you go with the deputy to go back to the other courtroom, and we'll all take a break, and we're gonna come back at, let's say, 3:25. And you can talk in the meantime, and counsel, why don't you come into chambers after a couple minutes. All right, thank you. We're in recess.